Morning. Thank you for joining us. Just a note on public speakers. We're going to start with public speakers a little bit later this morning, just after we conduct an employee recognition. But we'll start with the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the December 2019 New York City Transit and Bus Committee meeting? Second? Second? Someone? Second. Thank you. All in favor? Motion carries. Are there any changes to the work plan?
Yes, Chair. We moved up the financial close due to the 5-day close. It allows us to present preliminary December numbers in January rather than in February. You'll hear that later. As well as we're proposing removing the MetroCard report from the work plan and developing an Omni report to replace it. We'll still continue to track the information and have it available for your request or anyone's request.
Thank you. Questions or comments on the 2020 committee work plan? Okay, is there a motion to approve the 2020 work plan? Second? All in favor? Motion carries. Okay, let's go to Andy, President Byford.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Before I begin this month's update, Craig Cipriano, our SVP of Buses, and I would like to recognize a colleague from the Department of Buses who joins us today, whose intuition and concern for the welfare of an unaccompanied child exemplifies the dedication to safety and customer service of our transit employees. He was recently recognized by the Daily News as a hometown hero for his efforts. So on Friday, November the 1st, bus operator Tyrone Hampton, sitting over there, was on a routine run in Upper Manhattan when he noticed a boy board and ride his route. So far, nothing untoward. However, the boy remained silently in his seat for an extended period of time, even as other passengers departed. Something about the situation seemed off, so Tyrone contacted the police. He and a woman who had also noticed the boy waited attentively with him until the police arrived to take the boy safely back to his family. Tyrone's kindness and willingness to go out of his way to ensure the safe reunification of this boy with his family has earned this president's thanks and respect, and the sincerest thanks, Tyrone, of the entire 50,000 strong men and women of New York City Transit. Before we give you your award, Craig, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Andy, I'd just like to say to Mr. Hampton, thank you for your quick thinking and responsiveness. And, you represent the best of the best for about 18,000 men and women of buses. So great job.
So on that then, Craig, come over.
Mr. Hampton, thank you so much for your service. Okay, I want to turn to public speakers. Are there any public speakers this morning?
Good morning, Madam Chair. There are 11 members of the public registered to speak.
Okay, let's do it.
For our public speakers, I'd like to remind them that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware of the clock in the front of the room and the warning light you will see reminding you that you have 30 seconds left to conclude your remarks. The first speaker will be Jason Anthony, followed by Charlton DeSouza, followed by Matt Camper.
Morning, Sarah, and good morning, Andy. First of all, we received the draft of the Queens Bus Redesign Network. To be honest, it's a disaster. And why is that? because you guys are redesigning the bus network, but not having in mind small neighborhoods like Jackson Heights, Northeast Queens, Southeast Queens, especially Walkerway Park. And why people that now take a single bus, let's say from Jackson Heights to Beach 105th, putting this as an example, under the proposed plan, that person will have to take 3 buses. And 3 buses, it makes a single trip that right now is $275 to a trip that will cost $550, and doesn't make sense. And as a Bronxite, or living in Brooklyn, this bus redesign in Queens is a disaster. And not having a single bus route that goes to Manhattan and Queens, no late night service, express buses cutting service reductions, that's totally unacceptable. And I hope that Andy and Greg take these things into consideration to upcoming workshops that I'll be attending on Thursday in Jamaica. And in terms of the subway, we have to get rid of the homeless folks because they're taking over the subway, especially on the C, on the E, and on the R train, especially on the R on late nights and on the E on the late nights also. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Charlton DeSouza, followed by Matt Camper.
Good morning. My name is Charlton D'Souza from Passengers United. And Andy Byford and Greg, if you're listening, we do not want Nice Bus, Nassau and County Express, taking over the Q110 route on Hempstead Avenue in the Queens Bus redesign. In fact, you guys are not holding any meetings in Southeast Queens. In Queens Village, Camera Heights, and Hollis. You completely forgot about us. And we actually have the longest commutes, even longer than some Long Island Railroad riders. And that's why, Andy Byford, I kept talking to you about night owl bus service. The Q32 and Q60 should be called night owl bus routes overnight. And there's been broken vending machines at Jamaica Center, Parsons Archer, and also Supton Boulevard. Every day now, people cannot pay their fare because the machines are broken. So what I want to know is, if the machine's broken, are the police still arresting people if they, go through the turnstile? And also, we have a huge homeless problem on the E train. They're spreading bed bugs. That's right, bed bugs on the seats. It's been really bad on the F train. You need to get rid of the wooden benches once and for all, and steam clean the trains and fumigate them. This is why we have to take the bus overnight, because we don't want to be assaulted. I actually saw a woman getting beaten up at the 179th Street station. No police showed up for almost 30 minutes. This is totally unacceptable. So if you can fix that, that would be great. But again, in Jackson Heights, y'all are cutting the Q53. So many routes. And I think what y'all should do is wait for the new borough president to get elected next year and hold off on this Queens Bus redesign until the new administration has had a chance to, share their ideas with you, and also the new community boards that are being voted in under the new borough president. Thank you so much, guys. And I know, Andy, you're listening, and I know, Greg, you're listening. We hope to see you at a special meeting in Queens Village with us and Hollis. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Matt Camper, followed by Jessica Gonzalez-Royas.
Good morning, Transit and Bus Committee. My name is Matt Camper, and I'm part of Passengers United. I'm here to talk about the Queens Bus redesign plan. As you all know, it was released back last month. And there's a couple of things that I'm really very concerned about when it comes to the Queens Bus redesign plan. First of all, when it comes to Jamaica, I understand the plan calls for that people coming from Jamaica, let's say they want to go to St. John's University, they're a student at St. John's, or they want to go to, let's say, a men's basketball game at St. John's, they're going to have to transfer somewhere along, Hillside Avenue or something like that just to get to St. John's. And that's a big inconvenience for customers, especially students who have to get to St. John's if they are a student there. And it's going to cause a lot of confusion. And also the Q110, I feel it needs to remain under the ownership of the MTA. Nice Bus has been a disaster. I take Nice Bus all the time because I live out on Long Island, and it's just absolutely, there are buses not showing up sometimes. The buses aren't maintained. It's just not going to work out if the Key 110 is owned by Nice Bus. And I feel the thing here is that it needs to remain. It should not be eliminated because once the new Elmont Arena opens at Belmont Park, people from Queens Village, Hollis, even Jamaica are going to want to go to the arena for events such as basketball games, concerts, Islanders games, and it's just going to be a big, hassle for them to get there. And one last thing I'm going to mention, I'm in full support of the procurement in regards to the new, I believe it's R260 something, I forget exactly off the top of my head. The R67s and R62As and the R62s need to be replaced. 34 years old.
Please conclude your remarks.
I'm in full support of that. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Jessica Gonzalez Royas, who will be followed by Jim Burke.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, and I am a community advocate, a former member of the New York City Transit Riders Council and the PCAC, and a daily rider of both the subway and bus system in Queens. Like many of my working class neighbors, I do not own a car. I'm in strong opposition to the proposed Queens bus redesign plan. I want to point out, in a community that is majority Latino, the plan is not provided in Spanish. I live in Jackson Heights, close to the northern border where East Elmhurst begins, where the closest subway stop at 82nd Street on the 7 line is about a 10 to 15-minute walk for an able-bodied person. I'm deeply concerned, as is my neighbors, about the reduction in overall routes, service, and the lack of stronger east-west connections to the main transit hub and the only ADA accessible hub in the community, which is the 74th Street station. The other stations along the 7 line in the vicinity of Corona and Woodside, except for 61st Street, are not ADA accessible, and the buses provide the only fully accessible transportation for our community. In addition, there are many working class people, students, and elders who use the bus to traverse across the east-west line on 35th Avenue route on the current Q49 line that is proposed to be completely eliminated. And it connects communities from East Elmhurst and Corona that lack access to subway stations to the accessible 74th Street station. I'm also deeply concerned about the significant cut of the Q66 route, which is regularly packed and takes students to many of the local schools. I've stood there and watched as buses are filled and they let off students but not allow students get on because it's so crowded. I also am concerned about 2 buses I take nearly daily, which is the Q32 and Q33. While there are redundancies in those services, the Q33 is often so full as it travels southwest down 82nd Street that it's unable to pick up customers. And it's also proposed to go to an inaccessible station. Overall,
Please
I have
summarize
lots
your
more to
remarks.
say, but overall, I think the central flaw is that this was designed to be revenue neutral, and instead of it being revenue neutral, we have to invest and expand the system and ensure that we're providing better service that
Please summarize your
provides
comments.
much more convenience for our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jim Burke, who will be followed by Nuala O'Doherty.
Good morning. My name is Jim Burke, and I'm a resident of Queens and in Jackson Heights and Rockaway Park. And this bus redesign doesn't work for so many reasons. In Jackson Heights, we use and I love our buses, and this plan is written as if we don't ever want to take the bus, that we want to take a tiny little leg to get to the closest subway, and that's not the case. We have a number, and probably the largest number of naturally occurring retirement communities in several apartment buildings. We have lots of children with parents with strollers. We have lots of people, for whatever reason, just prefer to take the bus. Where I live, within 2 blocks, you can go to Manhattan. I can go to Rockaway Beach. I can go to Woodside, Sunnyside, Astoria. And it's a wonderful bus system that definitely needs some help, but it doesn't need to be cut. Also, out of the, there's only 8, from what I read in your existing conditions report, only 8 buses that are profitable, and 4 that I take in Jackson Heights will be cut. The bus terminal that we just spent $132 million on in 2005, it's like a redheaded stepchild now. We don't want to use it. And that's where our whole life in Jackson Heights centers around. the SBS, the Q53, which I love and I use on a constant basis, that we just spent $3 million on. And then at DOT spent additional monies to get the Broadway between Queens Boulevard and Northern Boulevard set up with TPS, with where it gets transit signal priority. And now you're going to cut the Q53. It's an amazing bus, and all of the buses that I mentioned are jam-packed. Before this ever happened, I was working on the Q66 because parents were very upset that their children couldn't get to school on time because 3 and 4 buses would pass them. In fact, buses don't stop on the Northern Boulevard between Junction Boulevard until 78th Street, completely bypassing our neighborhood because they're overcrowded. So I'm begging you to please listen to us and take a look at the plan. And thank you guys for coming out, but please really listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nuala O'Doherty, who will be followed by Yuki Endo.
Good morning. My name's Nuala O'Doherty Naranjo. I'm also a resident of Jackson Heights. I'd like to first thank Mark Holmes, Craig Cipriano, and Andy Byford for coming out to Jackson Heights and speaking with us. I know we were a bit gruff, but we love our buses. And we love our buses because we live in a neighborhood that is transit rich, not only by subways, but by buses. And we're really concerned that this new redesign focuses on trains and taking buses as shortest routes to trains. Well, the reality is I take a bus just around the neighborhood. I take a bus from my 90th Street stop right on my corner to my office on 72nd Street and Broadway. No train, I just go on a bus. We also in Jackson Heights are really fortunate to have so many options. You can take a bus to Manhattan. You can take a bus to an ADA compliant subway station. The new system have shorter, faster routes, which I understand your idea, but a lot of people pick buses for a reason. They're willing to sit for longer. They're willing to wait because they want the benefit of a bus. I specifically want to point out some really important key features. We have 2 very large local middle schools, IS 230 and IS 145, and our current route systems with the 66, the 33, and the 149 allow parents to put their kids on the bus and they'll be dropped off within a block or so from the school, and they feel comfortable doing that. Or they would not feel comfortable having 7th and 8th graders changing buses. So thank you for coming out. I hope you're going to come out, and thank you for listening to us because we love our buses. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Yuki Endo, who will be followed by Janice Bartley.
And then is and you can and then also Jackson High listening concern about the Q29 32, 33, 47, 49, 53, and 66 under the Queen's bus never design. And then 33, 49, and then 53 bus during the Sunday is always packed. And then Q53 SBS should not be cut. And then because majority of the Q53 bus riders go from Woodside, Jackson High, Queens Center at Lockley Park, which Q52 SBS does not go. And then which is done, and then which is done on the beach goers are going to Lockley Beach and the tourist attraction. Yeah. And then also changing the Queens bus numbers will not only confuse bus riders, and then it even also confuse the NYCT nice bus driver. We also get confused. And thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Janice Bartley, who will be followed by Murray Bowden.
Good morning, my name is Janice Bartley. It seems like people with disabilities will always be limited or restricted. I just had a birthday. Looking back over my life before there was the ADA, people with disabilities were very limited. Here we are in 2020 and we are still restricted from living our best life, and people are taking away the best means of transportation available to us, the on-demand program. Like I stated before, the on-demand pilot is a godsend for people who have to rely on Access a Ride. It gives people with disabilities the freedom to live richer lives. I am frustrated that the one form of public transportation that truly helps us to be independent in our daily lives could be restricted. There are many stories of how the on-demand program completely changed the lives of people with disabilities and doors of opportunities open for us. For me, the year of 2020 is starting off right. I have a chance to increase my workload and take my work to the next level. In order for me to maintain my duties and responsibilities, I need dependable transportation like the on-demand program was. It's sad to say we are in a new decade and society thinks people with disabilities are not capable of having a productive and meaningful life. Despite what society thinks, people with disabilities are very active in the community, and we are going to continue to follow our hopes and dreams. I wish people with disabilities could stop being looked on as second-class citizens and get access to the things that would help us get through our daily lives just like anyone else. Please keep... Please keep in mind, on-demand is the only service that is close to equal to the service and flexibility that non-disabled people get from the MTA, and on a per-ride basis it is much, much cheaper than the Access a Ride that I am stuck using to come here from home in the Bronx. It would cost at least 4 times the $15 I would be allotted each way to get here, just like it would for me to get to my own office. I just can't afford that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Marie Bowden, who will be followed by CN.
My compliments to Andy and your team for moving forward in a way that's spectacular. Your leadership and your team is important. There's one section that I think may have been ignored I'd like to bring to your attention. The lines and markings on a road have been there for 50 years, and they're not always appropriate. I've emailed Susan Pondish this morning, who's the deputy New York City DOT attorney who I've worked with before, and she knows how to correct and bring up to date some of the lines and markings on a road so that your buses and your people could move a little faster. She also knows how to adjust the signs so that they're more clear to drivers and keep drivers from being misdirected and being in the wrong lane at the wrong time. It has not been corrected in 50 years. Susan knows how to do it. I've worked with her. She explained to me how she's already changed some of those rules in the manual of uniform traffic control devices to make the roads go faster. Your buses would have a clearer way if the drivers had better instruction by the lines on the road. So any help, I'm prepared to meet with her. I've worked with the Markings Committee in Washington on this for 20 years. I'm one of the 3 people who designed the dotted lines for exit lines. I have the experience to help you go forward, but I can't do it unless you set up a meeting so that your lines and your buses can move faster. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is CN, who will be followed by Lisa Daglian, then Ellen Shannon.
Good morning. So I was a little bit disappointed last year with the New York City Hall meeting that some of the members of the MTA did not stay for the entirety of the meeting. I would also like to add that I think there can be some cost savings to the Access a Ride program. In 2015, it cost the MTA $10 million in recertifying Access a Ride passengers. I'm wondering if that can be done cheaper and maybe by some of the agencies for the disabled in the city. Also, it cost the MTA $15 million in 2015, for example, in fuel for the blue and white buses. I'm wondering if the $5 billion that is earmarked for making subway stations accessible could be better off used to make all the blue and white buses electrified, just like they did on the 14th Street busway. I think there'd be a lot of cost savings there. Also, I think maybe the MTA could advocate federally and on a state level to get reimbursement for the Medicaid trips that some passengers make to hospital appointments. From the figures I came across, if 1 in 20 trips were reimbursed by Medicaid, it would it would actually bring in a revenue of $3 million a year to Access a Ride. And also, if 1 in 5 trips were reimbursed, it would be between $10 million and $14 million a year. So I really would like to encourage the MTA to advocate on a state level and federally to try to get reimbursement for these trips. And one last thing I'd like to say is I would like to know, when it comes to the eHealth program, with these 8 round trip limitation.
Please summarize your remarks.
Yes. Will the passenger have a rollover if they don't use all their round trips? That's what I would like to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lisa Daglian, followed by Ellen Shannon.
Good morning. My name is Lisa Dagley, and I'm the Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA, or PCAC. Happy New Year to all of you. Safety must be the MTA's #1 priority, and therefore we're glad that all the R179s were taken out of service. Getting them back into service needs to be done cautiously but quickly. It's time to fix the bigger problems while you're at it. Using low bid is clearly not the best way to do business. We've seen that countless times. Given the R179 debacle, we asked the MTA board to look at using this same RFP approach to the purchase of rolling stock and other capital procurements that it is doing for design-build projects. The board's October resolution said it succinctly. It is a procurement best practice to solicit design-build contracts using a competitive RFP process rather than sealed bids, because the competitive RFP process allows the MTA to consider, in addition to price, non-price factors such as delivery schedule, creative design and construction approaches, the experience of the proposer, and negotiated contract terms. Put simply, there has to be a better way to increase competition and bring other players into the game. If we're going to make any lemonade out of these lemons, it should be to fix the process and not just the cars. On the subject of fixing things, top of the list should be changing the debarment rules to reflect the reality of the market and to have other players who want to work with the MTA. As written, Bombardier should already be out, not just for the R179 delays, but also on PTC overruns. Yet the MTA board, which wrote the rules, is flouting them. It's time to turn the emergency rules into regulations that hold contractors responsible, but are actionable and practical. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next and last speaker is Ellen Shannon.
Good morning. I'm Ellen Shannon, representing the New York City Transit Riders Council. The announcement of major delays declining is a big one for all riders, a huge win. Going from 105 major delays in January of 2018 down to 34 in November 2019 is nothing short of remarkable. And that means millions of people are moving through the system faster and having better rides. We want to thank you for that. We also have noticed this month has not been an easy month, this January. But we're noticing that your recovery from events, major delays, is getting faster. we're going to ask that maybe a metric could be created that demonstrates that decline in recovery time. We think you should be getting the credit for that. And so on behalf of the New York City Transit Riders Council, Andy, Sally, all of you, your full team, it's not unnoticed how hard you all are working through everything. All of you are more than a machine, because you're made up of a lot of people who are working nonstop, that you recovered the other day from that water main break and were able to put through full service by the evening while the Hudson River looked like it was pouring into the Upper West Side is just mind-boggling, and the people on board the train thought so too. So thank you all for how hard you're working for us.
Thank you. Madam Chair, that concludes the public speakers.
Thank you to all our public speakers. Let's turn to the President's report. Andy?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, good morning. And picking up actually from where Lisa left off, I'll update the committee first of all on the R179 trains, which, as Speaker Daglian noted, were withdrawn from service at the beginning of January on safety grounds. So I'd like to do an update. And the good news is we are making progress. First up, a huge shout out. I'm incredibly proud of our team at Subways, led by Sally and Frank, our COO, and also John Santamaria, who's the VP of car equipment, who have worked tirelessly over the past week. Everyone from our frontline employees to senior managers on this important issue. And it's paid off for our customers. When we found that we had this problem, literally overnight, we had to move train sets, marshal train sets, move equipment, inspect cars in order to reinstate R42 older trains and to move R32s around to make sure that we could run service. And we did. Since that night where we had to make all those moves, we've run full service every single day. And that's a huge testament to the Subways team, to the control team, to the operators, the dispatchers, the tower controllers, everyone who's been involved. I cannot thank them enough for their dedication to safety and service. So the work continues, and I wanted to provide an update on that effort. So the good news is, subject to confirmation, we are expecting a return to service this week of the R179 trains, to the 179 fleet, which is good news. But there's a number of caveats on that, so here's the current status. So first up, reminding everyone that this was initially, the initial cause was doors. So inspections and adjustments of all door systems, as well as software upgrades, and we insisted on upgraded software, not just the mechanical fix, but those upgrades and those adjustments and testing are now all complete for the entire R179 fleet. That's 298 cars. And that includes certified sign-off from the third-party inspector, which we employed, LTK. In total, taking into account also those cars that are not yet in service, that have not yet been accepted from the manufacturer or not yet gone into customer service, 318 cars, 2,544 doorways, and more than 5,000 separate doors have been inspected and certified for safety, in addition to that successfully deployed software upgrade that we insisted upon to ensure redundancy. Second point, Bombardier and their independent safety assessor have issued formal written statements attesting to the actions taken to date and giving their assurance that the fleet is safe to return to service. And we insisted upon that. We wanted written confirmation from the manufacturer. Third point, right now, having received those assurances, New York City Transit, as well as our third-party engineering consultant, LTK, are reviewing all of the information provided by Bombardier Transportation in support of their safety assessments. And once, and only once, all parties concur, we expect the fleet to return to service. Now, as we've said before, we will not return the fleet to service one day before we know and our independent engineers validate that all of our safety concerns have been addressed and that the safety of the fleet is assured. So I want to get these trains back into service, but not until we're absolutely certain and we've been through that paperwork with a fine-tooth comb. So I'll pause at that point. The headline then is we expect to have these trains back into service later this week. We've received the paperwork. We're going through it. But I'll pause at that point before going on to other items to take questions.
Andy, this is great news, or potentially great news. Just one question. When the doors on the 179s would come open, was an indicator light in the conductor's cab, or did it rely on a passenger to tell the conductor this was happening?
No, there's a number of safety features. All trains feature what's called I call it a pilot light, and that pilot light gives the operator, but also the conductor, assurance that door interlock is present. So and you need door interlock in order to take traction, as Commissioner Glucksmann knows all too well. So when the doors opened, the train lost traction. So in other words, the train did what it was supposed to do. The train knows that there's a problem, so you cannot motor. So that immediately, that's the first sign of trouble. The second sign of trouble is that you lose that indication light, so that you know you've lost interlock. And on both occasions, both of the incidents that led us to get into this ever-deepening issue, we did the right things. The train crew did exactly the right thing in blockading the doors, and then ultimately the trains were taken out of service. So we put safety first, but the more detailed analysis that we did led us to find further things and also to insist on further safety redundancy.
One last question. The doors that were opening, were they on multiple trains, I assume, or just one particular train set?
There were two trains involved. One was on Christmas Eve, and that was where the doors actually did open around 4 inches, and that was between stations. On the second incident, which was the beginning of January, something like January the 3rd, the train was actually in the platform. The motorman had just taken traction, and the interlock was lost. So it was on 2 separate trains, 2 separate incidents.
Thank you.
Carrying on, so obviously we'll keep the board informed as to when we actually sign those trains back into service. So I thought that this month was a good time to look back at the year just gone. But before I do that, there is also another milestone to acknowledge as part of transformation, namely the progressive migration of Aluk's team, CPM, Capital Program Management, into Jano's team in the new Construction and Development Group. So as we prepare to transfer many of Aluk's staff to that new C&D group, I would just like to say that during my 2 years as president and before that, the team, Aluk's team, has regularly delivered complex projects on time and on budget, and has achieved a high level of spend and project completion against its project portfolio. And as of writing, authority has just been received, which we very much welcome, to proceed with the 8th Avenue CBTC resignaling project, one that will see us use axle counters for the first time. This was a recommendation from Pete Tomlin, our VP of Signalling, and that will replace the traditional track circuit. So that's innovation in action. Look, as you and your team prepare to migrate across to Jano's team, I'd like to say a huge thank you to you for your professionalism and to that of your team for what you've done for New York City Transit. Great job, my friend. So anyway, for the first committee meeting of the year and for our biannual Fast Forward Progress Report, which we promised to do, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge where we've been and where we're going through the lens of our number one stakeholder, namely our customers. So we've got a presentation which should be just coming up on the screens. And just a little voiceover from me. So people often talk about the energy in New York and what they say is real. And I think that you can feel the motivation of millions of people who aren't satisfied with the status quo, people who have access to world-class food, culture, jobs, and who have high expectations. Well, so do we as a transit team. People need to make their next train or bus, and we get that. That's what we're all about as a team, progressively, relentlessly improving the service that we offer. And that's why I and my senior team, for that matter, we make a point of getting to every transit location as often as possible, both front of house, in other words, out with customers, like we did the other night at Jackson Heights, and behind the scenes as well, because we want to see what our customers see, and lately we're seeing things the same way. So, I'm very proud of the fact that as NYC Transit, we move 8 million people a day, and that we are essential to the lifeblood of this city. And that came through loud and clear in what we were hearing from the speakers just now. And so I'll just say, as a slight aside, that Queen's bus redesign, we get it. So people like Jim, where we were together the other day in that packed room at Jackson Heights, we totally get it. We want to get that right because we recognize that this service is all important to you. And we can and we are delivering on our promise. We will keep listening. It's just a draft plan. So the good news is we've shaken up the way that we do business to deliver more of the service that you expect. And in a few short years, we've pulled ourselves from that state of emergency which the governor declared in 2017. And we are now achieving a new level of speed and reliability. And these are just a few of our 2019 accomplishments that have wooed riders back to transit, bucking the trend elsewhere of declining ridership. The subway's actually seeing people come back. So Subway, under Sally's leadership, we've dramatically improved on-time subway performance and runtime statistics. And 2019 was our best operating performance since 2013. Trains are travelling from terminal to terminal faster than they were in years past. From December 2017 to December 2019, we've cut running times by an average of 2.7 minutes system-wide. May not seem like a lot, but if we sat here in silence for 2.7 minutes, it's actually quite a long time. These time savings are even more apparent on lines with CBTC, Modern Communications-Based Train Control. While the L, which had CBTC the entire time period, shaved 0.3 minutes, the 7 Express, the Flushing line, cut 5.1 minutes, nearly doubling the time savings of other lines. The power of modern signalling, despite its relatively short length. And that was thanks in large part to the activation of CBTC and what comes with it, namely automatic train operation. So imagine what it will be like when we've installed CBTC throughout the system. Certainly the next 5 years, we'll be doing just that with 6 major line sections. And customers, as I've said, are noticing it too. The sustained improvements in service has seen a resurgence in ridership, and that certainly bucks the trend internationally. Under Craig's leadership, working closely with NYCT DOT, we had a breakthrough year in securing bus priority enforcement through automated bus lane enforcement, ABLE, a considerable increase in street design improvements. And of course, we launched the 14th Street Busway, which has sped up buses by an incredible 55% and increased ridership by 19%. And after a highly collaborative process with our customers, elected officials and advocates, we've improved Staten Island Express bus performance, the first bus redesign. Speeds are up 10% compared to the old X routes, and applied lessons from the Staten Island process to 3 borough redesigns that are currently underway. And I know, Craig, you like to say 2020 is the year of the bus, and I think you're already delivering on just that. In paratransit, we launched the enhanced broker Accessoride service, which provides customers with online reservations and vehicle tracking, and that program grew immensely throughout the year. Under Sarah's leadership, we increased overall subway customer satisfaction scores, bless you, by nearly 10%, and even saw an increase in positive sentiment on Twitter. Who would have ever thought? Many of these improvements can be found in the customer commitment, and we've given you, board members, and this can be found, folks, at the back, the members of the public. This is on our website. This orange document is a synopsis of our customer commitment, which is our voluntary quarterly initiative to create tangible improvements in transit service and the customer experience. It's what I, in previous properties, have called a charter. These are additional time-bound customer-facing improvements that we commit to make. And that shows that we are accountable to progress and transparent in our efforts to do things better. And we've done all of this while becoming a more modern and efficient organization. Without the use of capital funds and building on the work of those before us, we have stabilized the system and attracted back riders by getting back to basics. So all this has been done with the existing service and the existing budget that we've got. Whoops, sorry.
New group.
Oh, damn it, I'm so sloppy with... Here we go. Sorry. Thank you. Thought I was going to get away with it today without a snafu. Okay, so these efforts then are just a few examples of our employees doing more with less, going above and beyond when we have fewer internal resources to work with. And it's our people, the wonderful men and women of transit, 50,000 of them, who have laid the foundation for the necessary investment in our infrastructure and equipment included in the 2020 to 2024 capital program. It's an ambitious plan, fast forward, to modernize our system and to make it more accessible. And it will increase reliability for 90% of our subway riders through modern signaling. It will improve bus reliability and give us better flexibility to increase or provide supplemental service. And within 5 years, it will ensure that you are never more than 2 stations away from an accessible station. In fact, with the commitment to make 70 stations accessible, we're almost at no more than 1 station away. So these are major investments that will require work. So let's come back to the topic of expectations. The unprecedented volume of work within the capital plan, along with a continued focus to maintain a state of good repair, will require some patience from our customers. It's simply impossible to install modern signalling along hundreds of miles of track or add elevators and ramps at 70 stations without some disruption to service. But we're continuing to find ways to get customers the information they need, when and where they need it, for both planned and unplanned disruptions. And I do encourage everyone to plan their trips by looking at mta.info or on the My MTA app. Transforming the transit system and the culture of this organization will also require the tenacity, passion and creativity of our 50,000 employees and countless partners, including my good friend Jano Lieber, who's heading up construction and development, to bring new solutions to the table and execute the plan that will deliver the Fast Forward plan to give New Yorkers the service that they deserve. And I know that they will succeed. In fact, they already are. We're now going to show a very quick video to end with on just one example of how we've adopted a more customer-led approach with our group station managers.
A new group of subway station managers has, over the past year, dealt with and solved more than 62,000 issues, many of which have been solved through personal contact with the public. 472 stations, 22 subway station managers. Seems to be working. So how? Here's Tim Fleischer.
Walk through the Bowling Green subway station and chances are you will run into James Lamort, one of 22 group station managers who each oversees anywhere between 15 and 20 stations.
We're doing okay. It's tough, challenging, but every day it's adventurous.
After the first full year of the new GSM program, MTA officials reveal 62,000 maintenance and cleaning issues have been addressed, along with deep cleaning 100 stations and making improvements at more than 200.
I want New Yorkers to know that we've got their backs, that while we work to make this thing better.
Having been a GSM in London and introducing it in Toronto before bringing it to New York City Transit, Andy Byford wants the GSMs to be the go-to person customers and riders can turn to anytime and anywhere.
I'm incredibly proud of them.
Given exclusive access to several of the GSMs with a proven ability to manage and a passion for customer service, it is clear they are changing the subway culture.
Every day is a challenge. I start my day looking at my emails, looking at red flag items that I need to follow up when I get to work.
Be mindful of the customer and how they perceive their day and their experience in the system.
Riders will find the GSM's picture in the station along with a way to contact them by email. In these before and after shots, there are tens of thousands of improvements, ranging from lighting to masonry to carpentry to plumbing and painting, are clearly noticeable.
Some of the employees will send me countless pictures on what they've done and how they're improving the stations.
Riders are noticing.
This is a good example. They're doing a good job.
I noticed there's a difference. It's a little bit cleaner than before.
They are also able to address problems more quickly, even involving other agencies.
We have a good working program with our NYPD and different social services to handle the different challenges that enter our system.
And every day is a challenge.
This is my normal day, trying to make sure everything is good.
So, Madam Chair, I'm very proud of the team that we built at Transit, the executive team, and of what we've achieved in just over 700 days together. I dedicate all of that success to the 50,000 men and women of Transit out there behind the scenes and in the offices, moving 8 million riders today. And with our Fast Forward capital program fully funded to renew the network and make it accessible, I think we're in good shape at the end of our second year. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Any questions or comments? No? Okay. Excellent. Thank you. All right, Sally?
Good morning. As Andy mentioned, December was another strong month of improved subway performance, and we closed the year in 2019 having made significant gains across a number of metrics. Specifically, December was the 7th consecutive month where weekday on-time performance exceeded 80%, and it was the 16th consecutive month where we met our delay reduction targets. For the full year of 2019, we exceeded 80% weekday on-time performance for the first time since calendar year 2013. Delays were reduced by 40% compared to calendar year 2018. We reduced major incidents by 33%. That's 42% reduction in major track incidents and 31% major incident reduction in the signal area. 12-month MDBF reached nearly a 4-year high in December, and December 19 compared to December 18 was improved by 13%. All of our customer-focused metrics, that's customer journey time, additional train time, additional platform time, service delivered, they all improved significantly year over year when we look at the December figures, and each of them reached an annual high in 2019 since we introduced those figures 5 years ago. So 2019 was the highest performance for each of those indicators. One of the best indicators of our success, as Andy mentioned, is the trend we're seeing in ridership increases in the system. November's the latest data that we have for ridership, the latest confirmed figures, and it was the 6th consecutive month of ridership growth in the subway system year over year. In fact, we had 2 days in November where ridership topped 6 million. We haven't seen a 6 million day in November since 2016. And shortly you'll hear from Sarah Meyer about gains in customer satisfaction, which we're also very encouraged by. As we've reported in recent months, up on the screen, you'll see the improvements that we're making in peak run times. Andy also mentioned these. So again, this is the end-to-end travel time of trains. This is looking at the median or the typical run in the peak period. And what you see from the blue lines is that each of those lines is running faster in 2019 in December than in 2018. And so what you can see from the chart is that nearly every line, similar to recent months, nearly every line is running faster this year versus last year. All of these improvements are the result of tremendous efforts from the subways team, whether it be through subway action plan work, save seconds work, fast forward work. Tens of thousands of subway employees are working each and every day to deliver reliable service and improved service for our customers. On top of that, they respond at a moment's notice to operational crises, significant disruptions, whether it's water main breaks, readying a substitute fleet for the 179 within hours, the team delivered. We are very lucky to have such a talented and dedicated team in subways, from the front line all the way through leadership up to our Chief Operating Officer, Frank Giesecke. I, for one, don't feel like I could possibly sing their praises enough. And on behalf of the entire team, want to let everyone know that we know we have more to do, and we've hit the ground running in 2020, and we look forward to delivering further improvements for our customers this year. This concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Sally? Andrew?
Sally, the statistics that we get look really great, but the terminal on time for the 2, 4, F, and D looks stupendous. Did something happen to those 4 lines, or was it just there had been work and now the work is finished, and that's why these on-time performance measures are so much better?
Are you referring to just the monthly numbers?
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be that we're comparing to a month of significant disruptions back in 2018. Certainly the baseline is that we're seeing significant improvements across the board. We're also seeing improvements where we roll out speed changes. So some of the more pronounced changes that we see month to month, whether it be in runtime or whether it be in on-time performance, can also be a result of us hitting a particular corridor or addressing a number of problems in a particular area.
And on a less optimistic note, the additional platform time for the 42nd Street shuttle, I assume, is due to the work that's going on there, because it's really a staggeringly higher number.
So the APT statistic is a very sensitive statistic. We're watching it closely. It's a relatively new statistic, and we watch it over time. But what we see is that APT is very much influenced by a small number of significant incidents, which we have had on the shuttle, but during rush hour. But we've also certainly had some changes in platform time with respect to the new operation that we're running in order to continue service through the project.
Yes. Thank you.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Is it possible to put that last slide back on the screen that we just had that I wanted to ask?
Yeah,
right.
that one.
So,
Yep.
I think that was the last one. So, Sally, can you explain regarding, so obviously peak improvement running times were better in some lines than others. Can you explain to us what caused some lines, forgetting the CBTC, where you modernize the signal system, but those places that haven't had that yet, what's the difference between a 6% improvement and a 0.5% improvement? And do you see some of those changing by the end of 2020 in terms of improvements regarding peak running times?
Sure. So these are percentage changes. So it doesn't necessarily translate into minutes because some of the routes are longer than others. So in some cases we see variation just based on that. Certainly the CBTC lines are the standout lines, the 7 line, because that's the big difference between 19 and 18. But similar to the response to Commissioner Albert, month to month we see issues both in the 19 year and the 18 year. And so some of these changes are reflecting some of the challenges that could have been specific to a particular month. We do overall see the gains in 19 more significant in the A division than the B division. Now remember, the A division has more sophisticated central control abilities, and we have more tools at our disposal to centrally manage and see more of the network from the Rail Control Center. We're moving quickly to equip the control center with B division visualization, and we've actually introduced more tools over recent months for the control center. So we are building out that capacity in the B division, but the B division is more challenging because of the more diffused control than the A division.
Can I just follow up? So Sally, do you have a year-to-year graph that's like that? Would that smooth over some of those issues?
We could put one together. I don't think we've done a year-to-year yet. We picked up this analysis, I think, in the spring. I can go back and see if we can run it for the full year.
Okay, thanks, Sally. Craig, let's go to the bus report.
Thank you. So before I go into my testimony, I would just like to reemphasize something that Andy had said, specifically to those customers in the group on the Queens redesign, right? Again, this is a proposal, right? This is our proposed draft, and it's not a fait accompli. You know, we've handed out almost 34,000 brochures, collected thousands of surveys, dozens of workshops, and quite frankly, there's almost 4,000 distinct sources of information we're using that fed back into this proposed plan. But again, the whole point here is to make this our redesign, to improve the bus system collaboratively and to incorporate your comments. So we appreciate everything that you've said, and we'll be out there listening for more. So thank you. So I'd like to get into the testimony now. So, you know, this is a significant point in time for the bus system and our 2 million customers. Looking at 2019 performance, we saw improvements in all key customer-focused metrics. Travel and wait times declined, journey time performance improved, and bus reliability was up by about 19% over 2018. So some really great statistics and trending in the upward direction. Working closely with our partners at New York Department of Transportation, NYPD, we have put forth really well-enforced bus priority. And where we're seeing that, we're seeing speeds are increasing and we're seeing customers coming back to the system, and it's really exciting. As Andy mentioned, specifically on 14th Street, we see on average 5 minutes travel time savings within a peak time and direction of up to 12 minutes just in the 14th Street corridor, which is really some great stuff. And as you're aware, on November 21st, we deployed bus cameras on 14th Street. Starting today, we'll be issuing violations. We've been issuing warnings for the last 60 days. Today starts the violations. And to date, we have over 9,000 warnings and violations issued across the 3 routes. And we're looking to build upon that. Early results on the M15 show speed improvements of 6%, travel time improvements of 4%, and weight assessments improvements of nearly 7%. And again, M15 is one of the routes that is showing customers coming back. You know, unlike the long-term decline of ridership on the bus system, where we're improving bus speeds, customers are voting with their feet and coming back to the bus system, and the M15 is one of those. Last year, we made significant progress on the network redesigns. Just a quick update. The proposed final plan in the Bronx went out, and we'll be looking for an implementation this fall. We launched our Brooklyn redesign, and as we spoke of, we released our Queens draft plan. One other highlight from last year is the reopening of the Rockaway Parkway Intermodal Terminal. The bus terminal is ADA compliant and provides free transfers between the L train and 3 Brooklyn routes, the B42, B6, and B82, and that'll be impacting for improved travel of nearly 7,000 customers every day. As Andy said, we want this to be the year of the bus. My team and I are energized to work closely with our partners, with our stakeholders, to build momentum on what we've been doing in 2019 and beyond. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions on the bus report.
Any questions for Craig?
Okay, great. Moving on to paratransit. So another significant advance in paratransit last year was the introduction of our enhanced broker service, which began in March. The service provides our customers many benefits, such as online reservations, broker vehicle tracking, wheelchair accessible vehicles, door-to-door assisted service by specially trained operators with specific paratransit training. Additionally, the service provides more trips using taxi and for-hire vehicles. Since March, when we launched the program, we're up from 187,000 monthly trips to over 380,000 monthly trips. While there were some growing pains, we have worked with our contractors to improve service to our customers. In fact, our broker service has shown improvement in many performance metrics. Pickup on-time performance within the 30-minute window has improved from 92% to 96%, and from 78% to 85% within the 15-minute window. The average duration of a broker trip decreased by 4 minutes, from 39 minutes to 35 minutes, and broker-related complaints went from 14.1 per 1,000 to 6.4 per 1,000 trips. While there's still much work to do, we consider this to be a significant improvement, and we will continue to work with our customers and advocacy groups to build upon this. And finally, this month, procurement, Lou, will be seeking approval to award the competitive paratransit call center RFP. Our paratransit call center operates 24/7, 365, and handles roughly 700,000 calls per month. The roughly 800 call takers and supervisors also support paratransit's dedicated comment line, eligibility, and subscription service lines. That concludes the report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Craig? Yep, Commissioner Albert.
I noticed that there's a 442% increase in additional travel time on Brooklyn Express buses. Can you explain why that is and why it's so high for Brooklyn Express service? Page 90. See, Brooklyn Express. Yeah. That's really high.
So I think I will have to get back to you on that one.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Maybe a typo, let's hope. Commissioner Lynn?
I do have some questions on the paratransit call center RFP. Should I wait till that, till we actually discuss that?
I defer to you. I had some questions too that were resolved. So, I mean, Craig's the right person, so happy to go through it now.
So let me ask you this. Clearly, a theory and approach has been to shift riders to web app-based approach and also to broker service. And I'm wondering whether or not in their RFP you account for the fact that there could well be shifts and the needs for the call center may differ depending on the shift to using other methodologies. That's one question. Let me just ask a couple of questions. And the second question is I've had a lot of familiarity in past years with call centers like 911 and 311. And I'm wondering whether or not you've done any benchmarking of costs for this type of activity and whether or not we could see some sort of benchmarking to know how the $287 million that's being considered here compares to some other operations. Like those are the, let's start with those two major questions.
Sure.
I had the same questions.
Okay.
Sure. So, and I'll ask Lou also to help out a little bit on the specifics, but we did take into account the anticipated shift from calls to more app-based booking and app-based communication, and there's different tiers of pricing that are in that contract to allow us to take advantage of those efficiencies. I don't know if Lou wants to add any more flavor to that as far as details.
So currently we're at about 25. Correct me if I'm wrong. About 25,000 calls a day. Looking at that and knowing that we're intending to reduce the number of calls overall, we've set up a series of bands in the price schedule so that we would be able to see more favorable pricing as we moved across the bands, but also to drive down the pricing as we become more efficient in terms of allowing our riders to utilize IVR, web-based systems, and other alternatives to making a call. We've created the price schedule so that there's an incentive to keep the pricing down with respect to the number of staff hours associated with each of those bands of call volume that I talked about earlier.
So does that mean if, let's say, you've underestimated the shift, that will bring down the cost, so that's built into the RFP, that the cost could be lower than now currently projected?
Yes, absolutely. As the volume decreases, there's a separate band, and that would reduce the cost to us. Each of those bands are associated with a level of effort on the part of the call center, GCS in this case, and they have to remain efficient because the staffing levels for each of those would be capped. Now, what we also did was we weighted each of those bands so that we would be able to take advantage of the most favorable pricing if the volume of calls shifted. And we're anticipating that they will drop.
So if I can just follow up. So let me ask, in some of the earlier discussions from a month or two ago, we saw some estimates that I'm told estimated the total cost of the call center of around $40 million a year going forward. And this cost is substantially higher than that. And I'm wondering why, if there are these types of trends, why the numbers would be higher rather than lower than prior estimates.
In actuality, it's approximately $41 million going forward. We saw an increase in price of approximately 1.8% from our prior year, the last year of the current call center contract. That corresponds favorably with the PPI that specifically deals with call center activities throughout the country. So I don't think we're seeing that much of an increase, but what we need to take into account is there were a lot of changes in labor rates. Minimum wage has increased since the last time, and a number of other benefit systems that are available to people in the city and in the state that would tend to increase the price. So looking at all of that, when we saw that we had a 1.8% increase, we think that was a rather successful, favorable price result.
So the number I should be looking at is the $202 million base.
202 is for the 5 years of the contract. So if you divided that, it's approximately $41 million, and the remaining 2 years, the 80 whatever it is for option years if we opt to take advantage of them.
And tell me about the question I had on benchmarking, of whether or not you've looked at other
we
programs.
Could both. Let me briefly say that, and then Craig, I think you could elaborate as well. We looked at benchmarking at a whole series of other transit properties as well as other call center and retail and other walks of life to get a sense of performance statistics, metrics, key performance indicators, get a sense of where they are, and try to incorporate those best practices in our RFP and for our contract. And there were changes in terms of having a single call taker take all types of calls, whether they be a reservation type call or a day of service call or some other activity that would take place. We think that maximized the efficiency, and that's something that we saw in other call centers. Again, the change in the price schedule was something we saw as a best practice to remain where the prices were capped in each of the bands or tiers of pricing. Craig, was there anything else that you saw from an operational standpoint?
Yeah, no, the only thing I would just like to add is that this call center, maybe unlike some other more generic call centers, is really an operational call center. It's embedded with our command center people to respond to day-to-day operational issues. And so it's operated a little bit more, it's operated very close to the paratransit operations. So that was important to us that when we took a look at the benchmarking, that we benchmarked that appropriately.
Now, are command center costs part of the 202 million or separate?
No, that command center costs are separate than that.
Yeah, please.
First, I have to congratulate the president and the entire team, because this has been a very good report, and it's a pleasure to hear it. We've had some bad times, and I think you've got your arms around this, and it is the entire transit organization to thank. It's especially nice because we had 2 very good railroad reports today too, so it seems like all of our operating agencies are really pulling by the bootstraps. I do have one question, and I don't think you need to answer me today, but I do think that Sarah and Andy and Pat and Mario should think about it. Just as we had a PTC working group that Neil organized and ran via Ronnie, we had an ADA working group that Veronica Vanderpool headed up. I think it's time for us to take a look at it and see if that was helpful. It was certainly helpful to the board because we were able to really dive into the data and get a better understanding of it. But these things have to be helpful to both sides. So would you consider that and let us know?
Of course. Any other questions? Craig, go ahead.
Yes, I'd just like to close out Andrew's question.
Oh, sorry.
So there's some ongoing construction on West 20th Street between Surf and Neptune and Brooklyn that's impacting the Express, specifically in the AM peak, and that's what you're seeing in those numbers.
Makes sense. Okay, any other questions for Craig? Okay, let's go to Rachel Cohen for an update on accessibility.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Rachel Cohen. I'm the Director of System-Wide Accessibility. I'm presenting the update this morning on behalf of Alex Elagudin. 2019 was a great year for our team. It was our first full year at New York City Transit, and we're really excited to report back on some of what we accomplished and build on those successes in the year to come. One of the big areas of focus for the System-Wide Accessibility team since our creation has been community engagement. In 2019, we held dozens of workshops and ride-alongs with advocacy groups and transit riders with disabilities. We took feedback from hundreds of customers on which stations to prioritize for accessibility in the next capital plan, and we formed our advisory committee for accessible transit to help set our accessibility agenda going forward. One of our biggest projects in 2019, which continues right into the new year, is our Accessible Station Lab at J Street Metrotech in downtown Brooklyn. Community engagement is a critical piece of that project, and the System-Wide Accessibility team conducted 30 tours of the station lab with hundreds of participants throughout the 3-month pilot period. We received hundreds of additional comments through our online survey, through social media, through email and phone calls. Last Friday, we ended the formal evaluation period for the 15 new smartphone apps and wayfinding features that we were testing at the lab. We're now working with our partners at NYU to analyze the feedback we received from both community members, riders, and our own staff who visited the station during the test period. Based on just the volume alone of feedback we received, some of the most engaging features have been the colorful wayfinding strips on the floor that mark transfers and accessible routes through the station, the floor marker for the accessible boarding area, and the tactile and colored tape warning strips at the top and bottom of each staircase. Even as we develop our longer-term rollout plan for the full set of features, we're working with our colleagues in Department of Subways to incorporate some of the individual features into more of our stations where they could assist with wayfinding, for example, during construction. So keep an eye out for those colorful wayfinding floor strips coming soon to a station near you. We also finished 2019 on a high note in terms of customer commitments. In addition to running the Accessible Station Lab pilot, we started a new ad campaign for courtesy seating on buses, and we updated our accessible travel guide, which outlines key accessibility features on buses and subways and helps customers with any type of disability navigate the system. That guide is available on our website, and we'd love for people to take a look and share your feedback. Finally, we continue to push ahead on several fronts to get elevator status information to customers wherever they are in our system. That's work that started last year with major updates to our website and email and text alerts, and is continuing now with elevator outage announcements from subway cars on the 1 and E lines and in stations on the Q and 6 lines in Manhattan. You can also increasingly find that elevator status information on our customer information screens, which are being deployed at more stations every month. Our goal is to get that information to customers wherever they are in the system so that an unexpected outage never leaves anyone stuck in the middle of their trip. And you'll see much more on this front in 2020, especially as we launch a new accessibility challenge with the Transit Tech Lab. We're looking forward to selecting partners for that challenge and getting fresh, innovative ideas for increasing accessibility throughout our transit network. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Cohen? No? Okay, excellent. Let me go to Sarah Meyer for the customer service report.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to report that in Q4 2019, 73.5 of our 90 customer commitments were completed on time, while 87 were completed by the end of 2019. That's 87 projects that have created tangible improvements. Personally, as you all know, I've been very carefully tracking the installation of our PA systems and can now say that we're thrilled to report that every station has a functioning PA system. We expect to complete the remaining 3 customer commitments. One's a platform rehabilitation, one is an app update, and a fast-forward community conversation. Those will all be completed in the first quarter of this year. We've also released our customers count satisfaction results for Q4 2019. Year over year, customer satisfaction with subways has increased by 9.4 percentage points. And during that time, satisfaction ratings increased on more than half of the lines in the system and did not decrease on any line. Compared to Q3 2019, results did not change by a statistically significant amount, remaining at 64.7%. Customer satisfactions with stations increased by 5.9 percentage points from last year, showing that what we heard about the group station manager program is really working. We saw increases in satisfaction for stations within especially Zone 4, that includes 3rd Avenue to 149th Street to Wakefield to 241st Street, and Eastchester Dyer, as well as those in Zone 7 from Canal Street to 59th Columbus Circle. 50th Street on the 1 and 7th Avenue on the BDE were also commended. There were no station zones where satisfaction decreased. Turning to buses, local, limited, and select bus service satisfaction, which is weighed by borough-level ridership, has not changed by a statistically significant margin from last year. During that time, though, there was an increased satisfaction, particularly on Staten Island routes, and a decrease in Bronx and Brooklyn. Customer satisfaction with express bus service did not change by a statistically significant margin, but did decrease slightly from 62.5% to 60.4%. Compared to the third quarter, system satisfaction decreased by 4.5 percentage points from 46.3% to 41.8%. I think that these numbers really show the importance of our bus redesigns, so hopefully looking forward to implementation dates soon. The full report is in the standard follow-up report of the section of the book. I also wanted to provide a brief update on our community engagement teams. We organized and participated in 15 public meetings with communities, transportation, advocacy groups, and elected officials, and this was in December. In addition, 17 meetings were dedicated to continuing discussions and briefings on our Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens bus redesigns. We also hosted our first ever live digital open house to broaden our public outreach for the Bronx bus network redesign final plan proposal, so that those that couldn't make it in person could watch our planners and Andy explain the bus redesign plan. So far, it's garnered 2,100 views, and we look forward to others seeing it as well. Lastly, just wanted to talk about the continuing modernization of our Lost and Found service. We actually extended the office hours, opening earlier and staying open later on certain days, accomplishing that by simply realigning staffing. New hours are Monday, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., and Tuesday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Sarah? Sarah, thank you so much. Okay, let's go to Robert, deal with the safety.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. This month we are focusing on the MTA agency-wide safety barometer survey that we participated in and which was administered by the National Safety Council. I'd just like to take a moment to thank all the departments and divisions for their participation in it and realizing that we have gained a lot of information based on this survey. Working groups from various departments have convened to highlight what we are doing well and what we need improvement on. So we'll go now to subway customer accident rates, which again were down, comparing the most recent 12-month period to the previous one. And they're down roughly about 229 incidents. Bus collisions, collision injuries, and customer accidents have increased when comparing the most recent 12-month period to the previous one. It is worth noting that bus collision rates declined on a monthly basis for the past 3 months, showing the results of the Department of Buses' efforts to reduce these collisions. Employee lost time accidents have shown an increase. The Office of System Safety, along with the departments, have identified the most prevalent types and are educating New York City Transit employees on how to avoid these. New York City Transit has also exceeded nearly all of our leading indicator goals. And lastly, the Department of Subway continues to make significant strides in the reduction of fires. Any questions? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, let's go to Chief Coogan. Chief?
Okay, good morning. During the month of December, total major felonies in the subway system were down 5.9%, with 16 fewer incidents than during December of 2018. Robberies were up slightly with 9 additional incidents, and there were 4 fewer felony assaults and 22 fewer grand larcenies during the month. We therefore ended the year with major felonies in the subways down 3.4%, with 87 fewer index crimes than the year before. There were 60 additional robberies this past year, 2 fewer felony assaults, and 144 fewer grand larcenies. During 2019, 40% of the total major felonies occurred in Manhattan, 30% in Brooklyn, 18% in the Bronx, and 12% in Queens. Finally, 24-year-old Jonathan Davalos was quickly arrested by officers from our anti-terrorism unit and charged with felony assault after attacking a New York City Transit conductor. Upon entering the Brooklyn Bridge City Hall station, the terminal point in the 6th line, the conductor exited the cab and attempted to wake the defendant, in this case realizing that he had missed his stop and in an effort to clear the train for cleaning and turnaround. The defendant then proceeded to assault the conductor. ATU officers Justin Beret and Anissa Mitchell were present at the station and took Davalos into custody. He has 2 prior arrests for robbery and is currently being held on $10,000 bail, awaiting his next court appearance. This arrest reinforces the point that assaulting the women and men trying to keep the city moving will bring about a full investigation and felony charges upon arrest. With that, I welcome any questions or suggestions you may have.
Thank you very much. This came up, one question for you. This came up in the Metro North Long Island Railroad Committee as well, this issue of robberies clicking up a bit. Can you just walk us through how NYPD is thinking about that in the subway system, since we're seeing a similar trend to Metro North and Long Island?
Robberies were up at the end last year. You know, they're slightly up again, well, not slightly, they're up again this year. It's a trend citywide, so up above, not just in the subways. You know, robberies are up also. You know, we're looking at all aspects. We're looking at the bail reform, you know, to see if that may be a contributing factor. But, you know, I mean, like I said, robberies are up, you know, around the city, not just in subways.
Got it. Great. And Chief, can you talk us through how you all make the determination about deployment? So I know that there are frequent conversations, I'm sure daily, about where you're seeing, for lack of a better term, hotspots or incidents rising, and then is deployment reflective of that, or can you talk us through how you make those decisions and how you approach it in coordination with folks here?
I mean, of course, that would be a factor. I mean, we look at crime, you know, conditions that are occurring. Like right now, the robberies are trending in Brooklyn. You know, we move resources there. We might put some more overtime out in Brooklyn. We'll look at the train lines where the crimes are occurring or what train stations they may be occurring. We look at crime patterns, whether we have a certain amount of crimes maybe being committed by the same individuals, and we move resources there. We look at the times of day that they're happening, maybe days of the week that they're happening, and that's how we deploy our personnel.
And those are like daily decisions?
Oh, we look at crime daily, every day of the week.
I just mean you make
The
deployment
first thing I do pretty much, if I don't have a meeting or something to go to, I'll look at the crime from the day before.
Right, you make deployment decisions.
Yep. So I read over every single crime that occurs in the subway system, the felony crimes.
Got it.
You know, And like I said, that's the first thing I usually do when I get into the office.
Okay.
And then, we meet. Yesterday, we spoke with all our borough commanders, about what you just said, the robberies, how they're deploying their people. We had a conference call with all the borough commanders, all of our field intelligence officers on a separate telephone call. Again, we look at this daily. We try to move the resources where the crime is happening. And, that's how we deploy our personnel.
Okay, thanks. And I had one final question, and then I know others have questions. I'm not sure this is your wheelhouse, so let me know if there's someone else I should go to. This issue of reclassification of some incidents. So there was I've followed for a number of weeks this incident involving Mr. Suarez, who was pushed onto the subway tracks in January of 2018 and then passed away, but was not classified as a murder, and that may well be accurate, but I'm just, as I try to understand what's happening in our system, when I come across things like this, I'm trying to make sure that I'm up to speed and understand. Is that an NYPD call in terms of reclassification of incidents, or is that a call that's made at another department?
Well, how we classify, if you're talking about a murder,
Yeah.
will be by the medical examiner. Medical examiner makes a determination whether it's a
Right. So
homicide.
and look, I'm springing this on you. We didn't have a chance to discuss it before, so maybe you want to come back. But the medical examiner classified it as a murder. It just doesn't show up in our statistics as having occurred.
Yes, and in the crime reporting system, that's what we go by. So whatever the person was charged with, the defendant in this case,
Okay.
and along with the medical examiner.
Okay. Maybe
Obviously, if
let's.
it's a homicide, we count that murders.
It's not
For
that.
murder.
That's what I'm saying. It was, but it's not being counted. So maybe we'll follow up and get to the bottom of that, because I agree that seems like that would make the most sense. But it is took place and
You're
was
talking about the case in Brooklyn.
January of 2018. Yeah, exactly.
I was
Brooklyn.
on the scene for it, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll follow up.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Schwartz.
Thank you. I've only been on New York City Transit Committee for a year, so, and I'll follow up with some of my questions with the chair, and also maybe we can have a meeting on some more policing type questions. But I just have a couple quick things I just want to add. Can you tell me the size of the manpower for New York City Transit Police? How many officers there are within the unit? And is the manpower number increased, decreased, or stayed the same over the last 5 years?
It's approximately 2,600 people, personnel. And
How
it's been pretty steady, maybe a little bit up.
And those officers and supervisors are deployed between New York City subways and New York City buses
No,
as you
no.
all New York City subway?
Subways only.
Subways only? And that's based over, 3 shifts a day?
Yes.
And are the manpowers in each shift vary? Or are they basically equal?
Well, no, they won't be equal. They vary, yes.
And
And then we have people working other tours, not the standard 3 tours. We have people work, different tours.
do you know how many?
And again, when we look at crime, we might have plain clothes that could be out there, hours when the crime is happening overnight. So they might not work a steady, one of the steady 3 tours.
Do the percentage of plainclothes versus uniform remains steady, or that varies too, depending on
Pretty much steady, but it can vary.
what percentage of the manpower is undercover?
I don't have that right. I can get back to you.
And regarding when the chair asked about deployment, how does the Transit Bureau of the NYPD make determinations and decisions on where to send officers in terms of whether they should be on trains versus stations versus some other location within the subway system?
Well, pretty much, I explained that. We'll look at the crime, see where it's happening, if it's in stations, if it's on trains.
Right.
Like last week, just to give you an example, the week before, it seemed like a little bit more crime happening on trains. We shifted our focus to on-train deployment. This past week, whether that worked or whatever, it seemed like more the robbery-wise and assault-wise was happening in stations. So we'll look at the crimes every day we look at the crime. We look at it on a weekly basis, daily basis, and we'll deploy the personnel as we see the crime occurring.
Do you have any statistics or breakdowns in terms of the number of officers, in terms of the number and man hours or officer hours, I'll try to be politically correct, officer hours that they spend riding a train versus standing on a train platform versus being somewhere else?
I mean, we do have officers that'll be stationed at a station for the whole tour, certain stations, Times Square, as an example. Then we do have officers assigned to riding trains where they may do a directive, where they'll go to a station for a certain amount of time, then they'll get on ride trains again.
I mean, I'll follow up, and I don't want to belabor this thing. Our meetings are long enough as they are, Chief, but, you know, I ride the trains on a pretty regular basis. I'm not going to sit here and claim I ride every line, but I almost never see an NYPD officer, let alone an MTA PD officer on a train, and I think that's a problem. I obviously see them in the stations, and I'm nothing but supportive of the NYPD and law enforcement, but I obviously, working with the chair and other members, I'd like to have further discussions to better understand and have some input on how officers get deployed and how much time they're doing there, because I do think it's a problem that we don't have enough presence actually on the trains, whether it's dealing with the homeless situation or other incidents that occur actually inside the trains. I think it would provide a level of comfort and confidence on the ridership to see just more of a presence, a uniform presence on the trains.
I also go out myself, few days a week on patrol, so I do see officers, riding the trains, but, I take your point.
Commissioner Albert.
Hi, Chief. I have heard from a number of people who have either experienced or know people who have experienced having their personal property stolen from them while they have been asleep on trains. In many cases, headphones taken right out of a rider's ears. How this didn't wake them up is beyond me. I guess this person was very good at what they do. But have you gotten reports of robberies while asleep from a number of riders? Or
Oh, yes, sleeping passenger crime. We look at that. That's another crime that we look at every week. I have this somewhere here. I have the amount of that happened last week. I don't know if it was 18%. I have it somewhere here. But
it's on the rise, I guess.
A lot of time that's at night. It doesn't happen too much during the day or the evening, even though it does occasionally happen then. But a lot of times it is at night. A lot of times when not saying everybody, but a lot on weekends, some people are out. They may be drinking. They're going to bars in Manhattan, and on their way home, they fall asleep. So that's the reason why some of them may not wake up. We do go around on the midnight hours, waking people up. Like there was a person that had it might have been an iPhone taken the other day. Might have been 45 minutes before that. An officer did wake up that person on the train. So but the person did go back to sleep. And
speaking of what you just referred to, has the police department spoken with the 4 nationwide wireless carriers about having the owner of a phone, if it's stolen from them, and they've made a note of the EIN number of their phone? Why can't we just have the carriers turn them off, make them useless, and that does away with any reason to steal a phone?
I mean, we've met with the carriers numerous times. I'm going to give you the reason why they don't do it, but, But the police department has met with carriers, trying to get that numerous times.
Sounds logical.
And we have the Find My iPhone app, which, we use, and it does work occasionally.
Commissioner Lynn.
So I have a series of parallel questions with Commissioner Schwartz's questions, but particularly directed towards the additional hires of the MTA police. Is this a time to raise it, or should I raise it in the Finance Committee? Where's the best time to raise those questions?
Well, Chief Coogan obviously is an MTA police. He's NYPD. So if the questions are for him, then
No. It's about similar question of deployment, how we're going to do various things going forward. So I want to ask those questions, but not to Commissioner
So maybe you want to ask him if Chief McGran, who will be here later this week.
Yes. Okay. Good.
Any other questions? Okay. Actually, 1 second. Jano, would love to go to you for a minute because I think you were going to give us a quick update on
Yeah.
Grand Central. Sorry to throw the
Not at all.
throw that change in.
So,
Thank you, Jano.
the so-called 42nd Street Connection Project, which we rolled out a little bit in public on Friday, will be the subject of more detailed presentation in CPOC. But just wanted the committee to be aware of some key highlights. This is a collaboration with New York City Transit. There were 8 separate projects that we were working on as a result of different capital program initiatives, and some of them were with developers. Everyone knows about the One Vanderbilt project, and they were proceeding on slightly different tracks. So we were asked to, kind of consistent with the spirit of the transformation, to pull them together and to do it. This is incredibly important. It concerns Times Square Station and Grand Central and Bryant Park Station, which together carry a process, what, Andy, 1.2 million customers daily. So more than any other subway system in America carries, right, Sally? So incredibly important. I think the project that's getting the most attention is the shuttle. The refurbishment of Times Square shuttle dates to 1904. A lot of it hasn't been changed, but with this project, the adjustment to the platforms and to addition of modern signaling and the straightening of the platforms at Times Square, we will for the first time have a truly ADA compliant Grand Central Times Square shuttle, and we're going to increase the capacity by approximately 20% on a daily basis because we'll be running 6-car trains. So this is a great project at the center of the system. But part of what is, I think, interesting about it is also how it's being done, where we reduced the duration of the project by 25%, made it much shorter in time, and also have managed to figure out how to run a two-track operation. Without getting into the details, it's incredibly difficult to do this work while the shuttle operates, and we figure, working with our colleagues at Transit, figured out how to do it with a 2-track operation. So huge benefit from that. There's also a new entrance coming right out of the One Times Square Plaza there, that old entrance which is over by the USO that everybody who wants to go east knows about, but is over by track 4. That's going to be closed. We're going to have a proper entrance over in that part of the station, which is, I think, a huge advance in many ways. In terms of accessibility, we've already opened 1 new elevator in Grand Central, and we're getting several more. This is, part of the transformation. But probably in some ways the most important aspect of this is all in vertical circulation, both elevators and escalators has been significantly increased on the Grand Central side. We've got 5 new stairways to the platforms, which is about a 30% increase in platform to mezzanine capacity, and additionally 3 new stairways up above, and there's a new fare entrance coming as well in what used to be the Hyatt basement. So we've widened the entire mezzanine by about 30%. So all of us who experienced that Grand Central station know that as you go from the godlike experience of Grand Central Terminal to the subway experience below it, that it changes to being one for, at best, mere mortals. And by adding a lot of mezzanine space, about a 25% increase in mezzanine space, by adding all that vertical circulation, we're doing, I think, an enormous amount to make the passenger experience better. And also, we're taking advantage of the fact that we had that One Vanderbilt contractor in there to finish the whole mezzanine with the new tiling, the new flooring, and the new column covers, and so on. So we're getting all of this done. Significant reduction in schedule. Probably most important, the 42nd Street escalators are being, we cut the duration of that outage from 14 months to 8 months, and the whole project is being done in about half as much time. So I think it's a good model for how together. Andy mentioned a Lux team. I think the integration of our 2 operations and rethinking of how do we do projects more coherently is already having a benefit. And I think that And people are excited about this because anything that improves those incredibly important nodes is huge transformation for the system. So more to follow.
Thank you, Jano. Anybody have any questions for Jano?
Jano,
I knew I wasn't going to get away with that.
This is an easy one. During this
It was 1904, Andrew, yes.
I notice you're still showing R62 cars in that picture.
I knew it. I knew.
Jano, will there be increased wayfinding signs during all of this construction?
Absolutely. Thank you I appreciate the prompt, because one of the major things we did is initiated a whole called the 42nd Street Connection. We obviously branded it, but we're, in addition to signage in the station, which explains how long certain areas are going to be at, and most of them are actually in Grand Central are going to be opened in the next month. But there's also an explanation of what the project timelines are, the project benefits, and we're handing out pamphlets to all the customers as they move through the station. So one shortfall of how it was being done up to now was we weren't really telling people what was going on and why, and I think that we are addressing that effectively.
Anyone else? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, I want to go to Jay Patel for the financial and ridership reports. Jay.
Thank you. Total year-to-date ridership for December 2019 was $2.3 billion, which was 16.4 million above the estimate, or 0.7%, of which subway ridership was 1.7 billion, 11.4 million above the estimate, and bus ridership was 557 million, or 5 million above the estimate. Average weekday ridership for the 12 months ending December 2019 was 7.3 million, or 0.2% higher than the 12 months ending December 2018. Preliminary data shows that subway ridership on the average weekday for the month of December is up by 1.1%, as well as the 12-month rolling average is up 1%. So that's great news. It's continuing the trend that Sally spoke of November. 2019 year-to-date fare box revenue was 4.613 billion, which was 31.5 million above the estimate. Year-to-date non-reimbursable expenses for December 2019 were 8.9 billion, which was underran the estimate by 47.2 million, or 0.5%, of which labor was less than budget by 25.3, and non-labor expenses were favorable by 21.9 million. On the MTA bus side, 2019 annual ridership was 120.4 million, or 0.9 million above the estimate. Average weekday ridership for the 12 months ending December 2019 was 0.4 million, or 1.3% less than the 12 months ending December 2018. Fare box revenue of 221.8 million was in line with the estimate. Operating expenses of 826.3 million were below the estimate by 5.4 million, or 0.7%, and 4.3 million below the budget, primarily due to the favorable timing of non-labor expenses. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No? Okay. Oh, you good, Chairman Lynn? Commissioner Lynn?
Yes. I'm going to want to make some comments about the labor settlement and the funding of it. Is this a good time? Because I see, I know it'll never be a good time, but I see on page one.
I just think it's funny that you always ask me like when you should say
well,
something.
Because
no one else listens to me, but thanks for asking.
Only today. I'll
great.
try not to make a. So let me say this, because as you know, I made quite a statement in December, as you remember,
yes.
Of why the financial plan and the budget were not being updated by the labor agreement. And I see here that, for instance, the labor may not need to be modified much for the budget, though probably the overtime, which was well over, would need to be modified for the labor contract, at least for the 2% wage increase that went into effect. And I remain a full supporter of that labor agreement. I believe it was critically important to reach it, and I said that at the time, and I believe that, as everyone says, how important the 50,000 workers are in terms of performing all of the wonderful results that we've had, remains true, and without a labor agreement would have been very difficult to continue that type of progress. But I am really disappointed in that we know so few details. And that we were promised that first it depended on ratification, and that ratification occurred 12 days ago, and we still have no particular details. That is all the more problematic to me as a board member in that I went on the TW website and discovered that the 25-page memorandum of agreement has been there since December. So that the 40,000 workers had the 25-page document, and with the specifics at a time when the board members had nothing. And I think that that is really problematic and disrespectful to what we're doing. And I think that the process has been sort of an upside-down labor relations process. That when I first got here, there was all sorts of public discussion by board members from Albany about MTA workers and how they were performing overtime, and not a lot of that has been substantiated. That we then heard publicly of the 7 pages of demands for giveback of the MTA, with, again, no discussion with the board what was going on, and yet we all lived with those 7 pages. We then had the MTA actually, the chairman actually speak in I think October about availability, issues that worker availability. This should have been central for the labor negotiation. It shouldn't have been a public conversation at the board meeting. And then there was a rather strenuous, strong, vituperative letter from the chairman to the head of the TWU about health benefits. That was, again, a public discussion when the thing should have really been at the table, and that finally mediation was brought in, and wiser heads prevailed, and a settlement was reached that covered a whole host of areas, and a number of areas that I think are very good. Since I now sat down and read the decision, there's all sorts of, besides the wages, there's healthcare cost containment, there's fare evasion understanding, there's equalization of overtime, there's employee availability, there's all sorts of things that I think the MTA should be proud of having achieved, and yet is lost because of the keeping hidden and keeping away from us and the public of what really went on. And so I think that it really is, we're doing a disservice to ourselves. And I don't want to say that this is necessarily emblematic of a lot of things, but I think it is emblematic of a lot of things that I've been involved in. We receive thousands of pages every month that we go through, much of which are really inconsequential from the overall issues that we have to deal with. The labor agreement is far from inconsequential. It's fundamentally important, and yet we receive nothing about it. We're going to be voting on Thursday, and we still haven't seen details. We're going to be voting on a financial plan update that has to incorporate this. I'm not sure whether that's on Thursday or when that occurs, but I believe it is critical. We are not being treated appropriately in terms of the important matters that go on, of being brought up to date, seeing the details. The press have regularly called me as a labor person of what is my opinion about the labor contract. And I have to say, I don't know. I haven't seen it until I saw it on last week when I went on the website and found it. I think that is a wasted opportunity to express what's going on, to take credit for what we've achieved, and to express it. And we do it very well when it comes to the operational details. I commend everything that Andy and his team does in terms of the operational details. I do not commend the way we deal with the labor force in this particular issue.
Okay, well, we joked about you asking permission to speak, and now it really is funny because I thought you were asking because it was going to have something to do with transit, but that everything you just said, which I agree with much of it, by the way, I feel like should be taken up with the chair of the board. Yeah,
yes.
Because you realize I did not lead the labor negotiations, I assume. Okay.
I understand that, and happily I do believe that Andy did participate in the labor negotiations at the end, and it is a transit settlement. And that's why I thought it was relevant to the discussions of the transit group. But you can rest
No,
assured
I
that I will repeat this on Thursday.
That was not my point. Okay. All right. Let's move to Alok with the capital program, please.
Thank you, Chair. In December, New York City Transit awarded 20 projects for $459 million. These include purchase of 275 hybrid electrical buses. Each of them will come with the latest the safety and customer service technology. And also the relocation of the sewer system for 207 Street Yard. And the state-of-the-good repair for central substations in Manhattan. In December, New York City Transit also completed 16 projects for $204 million. That includes the UWB, ultra-wideband, the pilot program, and then acceptance of the last 20 cars for R179, and the installation of the netting at 6 locations for elevated structures for the debris protections. That pretty much concludes the capital program report.
Any questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Albert.
So, in the discussion of CBTC and how it's being turned on in various places that was in the Transit Committee book, I don't see a schedule for installation on the West Side IRT, on the 1, 2, 3 lines. I see it everywhere else, and it's even in the preliminary discussion of the R262 procurement, which we're not hearing today. But when is it scheduled? That's a major gap.
That is set out within the capital plan. We have, for the next 5 years, set out what we're going to be doing in terms of progressive CBTC installation in the first 5 years. And then we also, within the Fast Forward plan, predict what we will then do in the second 5 years, subject to funding, of course, to progressively bring the whole system up to a modern signaling system.
So that's in the second 5-year then?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else for Alok? Okay, I want to turn to procurements, but before I turn the conversation over to Lou, I just want to note something I noted to my transit colleagues in an email last night. We're removing from the procurement discussion today two items. One, the RFP for the new open gangway cars, as well as the consultant contract for CH2M. We will likely take those up in February. We're not tabling, which is an official thing. We are removing them from discussion today because I felt, and I think other members of the committee felt, like we needed a much more significant briefing offered to us to talk about open gangway cars, how we got here, how we're thinking about them, how we're moving forward, the size of the procurement. It's somewhere between 500 and potentially 1,500 cars. I think it merits a longer conversation and just making sure that everyone's up to speed. And then the consultant agreement with CH2M, which is just significant in its size, I think also merits a longer conversation. So we'll have those conversations in the coming weeks, and then we'll likely take action in February. And with that, let me turn it over to Lou. Thank you.
So I'll brief on the remaining item in the package, which is the procurement for the operation of the paratransit call center. The call center is a significant part of Paratransit's command center, employing approximately 800 people who book reservations and handle calls regarding same-day service for Access-a-Ride customers, as well as providing other command center communication assistance. The term of this contract is comprised of a 5-year base with an option for up to 2 additional years. Prior to solicitation, we performed a comprehensive outreach seeking competition, updated the scope of work and price schedule to capture efficiencies, take advantage of industry best practices, appropriately reflected anticipated call volumes, which we talked about earlier, and established a tiered pricing model focusing on contractor efficiency. 8 proposals were received, 3 firms were selected for negotiations, and 2 firms, First Transit, and the incumbent Global Contact Services were invited to submit best and final offers. Through negotiations, both proposers decreased their pricing from initial proposals to best and final offers. While both proposers were technically strong, the selection committee determined that GCS's lower pricing outweighed First Transit moderately higher technical ranking. The selection committee unanimously recommended that an award be made to GCS because of its strong technical proposal, extensive knowledge in the industry, and lower pricing, all of which provide the best value to New York City Transit. The base award to GCS to operate the call center for the next 5 years will be in the estimated amount of $202 million. The additional 2-year option will be in the amount of $85 million. GCS's final pricing was $21.7 million, or 6.8% lower than that of First Transit for all 7 years. I request the committee's approval of this item in the procurement agenda.
Thank you. I request the committee's approval of all items in the procurement agenda, which is at this point just the one item. Is there a motion to?
Chair, can I ask a question before we vote on this?
I think we're supposed to move it, and then you ask a question, and then
I'm
we
happy
vote.
to second moving it
I do.
before I ask my question. Thank you for
Move,
straightening me
second
out.
Question, Commissioner Schwartz.
Question. What is the union that, in terms of the people that work in the call center, who are they represented by?
The contract with GCS, GCS has a collective bargaining agreement with TWU Local 100.
Okay.
That expires the end of March.
And has somebody checked their labor relations record with GCS to make sure that there haven't been outstanding issues or problems? In the past, we've had people, our MTA workers come here and make public complaints about treatment and working conditions in our call centers. So I'm wondering whether or not we did our due diligence to make sure that this vendor has a good labor relations record as well as.
As far as we know, yes, but we can double check and get back to you on that just to ensure. This had a rocky start prior to the union, and I believe, Craig, that their performance and labor relations relationship has been steadily acceptable, if
Yeah.
not better.
Yeah, I believe Commissioner Schwartz, what you're referencing is as TW was organizing back when. They were not originally represented by a union, and during the organization process, we heard a lot of issues. But since then, it's been a productive, collaborative environment.
You know, I've been on this board for almost 5 years, not as long as Sue Metzger. So, but over those years, we've had a number of committee meetings and public hearings. We've had complaints by MTA workers about mistreatment at some of our call centers. I'm not saying a paratransit call center, I'm just saying in general. So I'm asking the question that before we approve a multi-million-dollar contract with this vendor that's going to oversee the paratransit call center, do we know whether or not, when it comes to labor relations, whether or not they have a good track record, a fair track record, a poor track record, you know, before we award this contract? I'm not trying to hold up the contract, I'm just asking a question. Do we know the answer?
Commissioner, I might ask Kim, would you mind just commenting on this? Kim's our Executive Vice President of Labor Relations, so she manages the contract with the contracts with the unions.
We don't manage that particular contract. This is the same vendor as we've had over the last few years, so we haven't had any issues with them in regard to labor relations.
No, we haven't had grievances or anything filed by the TWU. I mean,
TWU
out of the normal or something like that.
The employees belong to the contractor,
Right.
not us, so the grievances wouldn't come to us, but we haven't heard about any labor
But
relations
complaints would
issues.
come to you if they thought that they were looking for the MTA to put pressure on
That's
the
correct.
operator to improve working conditions or treatment of the workers.
That's correct, and we haven't had anything like that.
Can I just follow up on Larry's question, which is, so these are employees of the private contractor, so therefore not covered by the Taylor law. So they have a right to strike pursuant to not being covered by the Taylor law. And is there any agreement with the contractor that there would be no strike during the 5-year term or anything of that sort? Or is that something we should be concerned about?
No, concerned about them going out on strike. I'm just was interested in knowing whether or not this operator has a good record in terms of treating the workers, their employees, well. That's so that we don't have a labor relations issue. I'm not worried about a potential strike here. I just want to make sure that working conditions are to a level that this board would expect.
Right, I think it's fair. So Craig and Lou, can you guys take that back and make
Sure.
sure you probably, it's possible you have done your due diligence and you just don't have it in front of you. My guess is you have, so just bring it back.
Sure.
Okay, great. Any other questions on the procurement package? Okay, all in favor of the procurement package?
Aye.
Opposed? The procurement package carries. Any recusals? Okay, all right.
Just make sure you get
Yes.
back to us with the information before you actually sign the contract. That would be appreciative. Thanks.
Agreed. Sorry, I'd actually assumed you would bring it back like prior to Thursday. Yeah. Before
Sorry,
it moves further.
that's exactly what we'll do. I mean, I've visited it on a number of occasions. I've never, in my 2 years here, heard of any discontent, but I think it's a fair question, and we'll check it out. And to your point, we'll get it back to you before Thursday, because
Great.
obviously it's Thursday
Right, 'cause
seminal for the
Thursday
vote.
we have to vote. Perfect.
Understood.
Okay. All right, let's go to Judy McLean to review a service change.
Good afternoon. Regularly assessing bus schedules is one of our agency's routine business practices. It ensures that we adequately meet current ridership demand on each route by time of day, consistent with MTA bus loading guidelines. It also allows us to deploy available bus resources where they are most needed to provide our customers with the most efficient and most effective bus service. Details of the adjustments are in your package. One route, the B1, is being converted to articulated bus service, which will significantly increase seat capacity on this route and better accommodate large customer loads at Kingsborough Community College, which currently can overload the buses so that downstream riders are not able to board. Weekday and Saturday frequencies will be somewhat reduced, but customers on average will not have to wait more than 1 additional minute for the bus. On Sundays, service frequency will increase during the morning and evening periods and will stay the same during the midday and afternoon periods. On other routes, service frequency adjustments will result in a net increase for 25 schedules and a net decrease for 27 schedules. These changes will result in a net annual cost of approximately $120,000. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Albert.
Judy, I'm going to ask my usual 2 questions. Were the ridership counts visually observed or using fare boxes?
It's a combination. So we actually go out and do counts on buses. We also use AFC data. And so the counts accommodate or account for any kind of fare evasion that we get. We run the information through a ridership model and using both sources, and then our schedule makers also go out and check routes.
And how many times, varying by day of the week and time of day, was each route surveyed?
The routes are typically surveyed. It depends on, sometimes they do a combination of peak load checks, and sometimes they do a combination of a traffic checker riding every trip and being on the bus for every stop. So the number of counts can vary, and that's why we like to combine the data sources, because by using the AFC data, we get a very extensive data source. But then we need to double check with these actual counts to make sure that we're capturing fare evasion and other kinds of abnormalities that might happen.
Right. And my last question was any of the routes on which you are contemplating a cut in service, did they experience construction or an undue break in the normal free flow of buses, which could have affected ridership?
The schedule makers look at things like that. They also work closely with the Department of Buses and road supervision so that, you know, we find out. I mean, some of the routes that we actually have on our list were suggestions from the union members, were suggestions from Department of Buses because they recognized that there were problems. There are some running time changes, particularly the BX 35. We ended up adding some running time to that route because we found that performance was lacking and that there were problems with us meeting the schedule.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Judy? Okay, thank you very much. All right, Andy, standard follow-up reports.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to the MetroCard report, which is the final publication of that document this month, the book also includes the customer satisfaction report for the fourth quarter of 2019, which Sarah highlighted in her remarks, and you can see those reports in the committee book. In terms of outstanding action items, Chair, there is nothing outstanding.
Okay, any questions or comments on the standard follow-up reports? Okay, motion to adjourn. Second, okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.